Today I'm just putting a bit of compost on my no-dig beds. Most of them are done. I had a couple of beds that I sowed some winter peas and some winter broad beans, some early broad beans, um, and they just haven't done very well. I lost half the peas to mice. Put a few traps down once I realised I was getting some damage, but it was too late. They kept coming, and I caught a couple, but I ended up losing almost all my peas. And the broad beans, I don't know if it's because I'm in a bit of a frost hollow, and I get a lot of cold nights here, and there's a constant breeze across the holding pretty much all the time, and it just seems a bit harsh. Out of about 30, perhaps 40 broad beans, I ended up with about 4 little plants which are this big, and they looked a bit bad even. So I just pulled them up. I'm going to mulch the beds, and I'm going to start again in the spring. It's just learning what works. You got to learn what works on your plot for where you are, for what your weather's like, and I'm still learning here. I tried planting them early. It's the first time I've done it, and it just didn't work. I'll try again next year, I'm sure. Maybe try fleecing them over through the winter. Whether that would get a bit of a battering from the wind or any snow, I don't know if it'll work. But I'll try different things. But this time round, it just didn't work. So I'm gonna get my compost. This is my homemade compost. So it's quite a good compost. It's done pretty well. It's my first batch of proper compost that I've made a big amount of. I have played around in the past just using like the little plastic um, composters that you get for your back garden, but this is my first proper batch where I mixed equal quantities greens and browns, and I've turned it. This has been turned twice. There's still a few lumps in it. If you have a pick through, there's a few twiggy bits, little bits of stem. It really doesn't matter. A few little clumps. That probably was grass, I should imagine, but it really doesn't matter. I'm not that bothered. I'll put that on the top, and it can continue to degrade and to break down in the soil. If there's any little lumps where you're specifically going to plant, just push it to the side. The ground I plant mainly with my hand. I don't need to use a trowel or anything. That's the great thing with no dig. The ground's lovely and soft. You can just use a dibber, or you can just use your hand. You don't really need to get a trowel in there. It's so soft and friable. So we'll fill this barrel up, and we'll go and put some on the beds. It's a little bit dry, this compost. I do tend to give it a bit of a water even when it's finished, just to keep it moist. It's not too bad. Just break up any lumps if there are any as you go. Get a few lumps in there, just break them down. I use this long handled shovel. I think they call it a Cornish shovel. I bought this because I do suffer with my back. I've got very slight scoliosis in my back, and I do suffer with a bit of back pain. So having a long handled shovel like this, just when I'm moving light stuff like wood chip or compost, it just saves my back a little bit, because it's bending down low, which really sort of hurts my back. So for £20, I think it was, it's quite a good investment. So there you go, that should do. So on each bed, I'm putting about 3 of these, about 3 barrel loads. So I watch a few people on YouTube, obviously, to get tips. Like I say, I'm no expert. I watch Charles Dowding, and there's another guy, a young guy, I think he's based in Wales, called Hugh Richards. He's got a lot of good videos too. But Charles Dowding, I really have got into a bit of Charles, and he says to put between 3 to 5 centimeters, and probably more around the 3 mark. Well, what I'm actually doing, because I found my beds, I made the first 12 last year, and I've just finished off up to 20 literally a couple of months ago. I did use the cheapest multi-purpose that I could get, so I used sort of B&Q's own multi-purpose compost, and there's a brand called Erin, I think it's called, where it was 3 for 10, three 50 litre bags for £10. So just using cheap compost, because each bed, you know, I've done 20 beds, and each bed cost me between 40 and £50 per bed, because I had no homemade compost to start with. What I did find last year, I've had nothing but problems, to be honest. I suffered terribly with wireworm, as I said in one of my other videos, because I went from pasture land to vegetable growing, and that can be a problem. What I also found is that the cheap brought in multi-purpose compost, which is, I think, green waste based, I'm sure it's, you know, we need to go that way. We need to stop using peat, obviously, but I did find it just doesn't hold the moisture. It just dried out, went really dusty, and I think that was part of the problem why I had some germination problems last year with my carrots, things like this. So what I'm actually doing this year is I'm going to try to put a good couple of inches of my homemade compost on top, because it's definitely more moisture retentive. There's a lot more fibrous and bits of wood chip and stuff in there. I can tell straight away it's just going to hold the moisture better. So I want to get a good layer of this on to try and give myself a bit of a better head start this year, because I definitely don't want another year like last year. Had a lot of failures last year. So let's go and get this on the bed. So that's 3 barrel loads on the bed now. Just going to rake it out and just try and sort of break up any lumps a little bit more with the rake. I don't tend to worry too much about going right to the edge of the beds, because I get a lot of blackbirds and things on here that just hook it all out. You know, it's when I first did them last year, I was coming along and I was trying to rake it all back off the wood chip back onto the beds, and I just gave up in the end. They keep coming, the birds, they love it. They get all the little grubs and things, worms out. So you will find that there'll be, especially blackbirds, will be coming along and hooking it all out. But to be honest, I don't worry now. I just put my wood chip on the paths, put my compost on the beds, and if the birds blend the two together a little bit, then that's what happens. You just gotta live with it, you know. You just be constantly fighting it otherwise. So I just go roughly to the edge like that, just breaking up any lumps as I go. So that's the compost raked out. There's a good, like I say, good couple of inches there before I'm back down to the compost that I originally put on last year. So I'm hoping that this compost will, as I say, hold the moisture a lot better. Got a couple of other beds to do before I'm finished. So yeah, I won't be planting in these beds. I'm going to start my seeds a little bit later this year, because I'll get such cold weather down here, and because I've only got the paraffin heaters and the propane heaters for the polytunnel. I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to leave it till probably end of the month. We're sort of first week in March now, so I'm probably going to leave it till the end of the month, possibly even into the first week in April. Just see what the weather's going to do around that time. I just things just get battered a bit here. I get a lot of wind and a lot of very cold nights. But yeah, so this is going to, you know, feed the soil. That's the whole thing with no dig. The compost is feeding the soil, and the soil then feeds the plants. So you think, you know, you've got billions of bacteria and all the bugs and worms and things that live in this, all living and dying, all excreting. And this is what the goodness in the soil is that life, that trillions and trillions of little things living in the soil is what creates the goodness. And also the fungi that you get naturally with the wood chip and all this sort of thing. This all creates the sort of perfect environment for growing your plants in. And it's a whole lot easier to weed. You know, it doesn't, I think when I first looked at no dig, I thought, oh great, no weeding, but you do get weeds, and especially I get some of the perennial sort of things that were in the meadow grass before coming up. But you just got to keep on top, just keep pulling them. It's nothing like digging. When I used to dig my borders on my other plot over there, you just get thousands. It's like a carpet of little tiny seedlings, all sorts of things coming up. Whereas here, doing this, it cuts it down phenomenally. It really does cut it right down, and they're so easy to pull up. They just literally just pull up because the ground's soft and friable. They just come straight out. It's really easy. Um, so yeah, this is going to be my second year of no dig. Had a few failures the first time. Obviously, I had no homemade compost at all. So this is really going to be my first proper year where all my beds have actually had my own compost put on them. So we're just going to have to see how we go, I suppose, aren't we? But yeah, hopefully I won't have too many failures, especially as I'm doing these videos now. It could be a bit embarrassing, but no, hopefully it'll all go well. But I'll do videos of good stuff and any failures I have, because I think it's important. You know, we all have to learn. So yeah, I will show if I completely balls things up as well. But I try to learn from that and find ways around things. I have to net everything here. I spent a couple of £100 last year, bought a load of butterfly netting and bird netting, and I got 100 meters of fleece as well. And for Christmas this year, I got some hoops, 8mm steel that I bent around a 40-gallon drum for doing lower hoops. And I just put those through some black pipe, like some black hose, to stop it rubbing the nets and wearing through them. And I also got some nice square aluminium tubing square hoops to go over for slightly higher stuff like brassicas and things. Obviously I don't live here, so pigeons and stuff like that, rabbits can't get in because I've done the fence. Deer, I had to extend the fence because Muntjac just jumped it. But pigeons and birds are going to be my problem here because I don't live here, and obviously the butterflies and things as well, because just not being here is a bit of a pain. But hopefully I'm all set to go now. It's been a bit of an investment, netting, the wire posts, everything. This whole area's cost me probably just over a couple of £1,000 in the last 2 years. But it's my hobby, you know, and it's worth it. It's worth every penny to me because it brings nothing but enjoyment. So yeah, it's worth every penny. But yeah, so here's looking to a good growing season hopefully this year.